Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection of me. I know more about, him and his life and Amy Irving and what have you.
I can tell you that the #1 problem in Hollywood was and is and always will be.
Nobody talks about.
It's the big secret.
And it's widespread?
Oh, yeah.
Actress Julia Roberts has stirred things up again, reigniting her long-standing feud with Steven Spielberg. The Pretty Woman star has reportedly made some surprising claims that could spell trouble for her old rival. Y'all might remember that back in January, a court in Manhattan released a list of people linked to Jeffrey Epstein.
Newly released court documents relating to the Jeffrey Epstein. They include associates, friends, and alleged victims of the disgraced billionaire who died in jail 5 years ago.
During that time, rumors were flying that Steven Spielberg was on the list, along with several other notable individuals. The internet was split. Some fans couldn't believe Spielberg would get involved in Epstein's scandals, while others argued he wasn't above it. The debates raged on for days, but eventually died down. That is until recently, when Julia Roberts reportedly decided to jump back into the conversation. She revealed what many fans had been suspecting all along, and boy, it was extremely shocking. So, what did Julia Roberts say about Steven Spielberg, and how does it tie into their long-standing feud? We've got all the juicy details right here, so let's dive in.
I know more about, him and his life and Amy Irving and what have you than I probably said about my own life.
Julia Roberts and Steven Spielberg are the epitome of not seeing eye to eye. These two have been at each other's throats since shooting the hit movie Hook wrapped up in the late 80s. Spielberg bitterly complained about Roberts' attitude during filming, claiming she was often unprofessional and had difficulty following directions. At the time, Roberts was going through a tough period due to her turbulent relationship with her co-star, Kiefer Sutherland. The two stars, who met on a previous set, were engaged and set to be married a day after filming for Hook ended. However, things took a turn for the worse when Roberts caught Kiefer cheating and broke off the engagement.
It wasn't what she wanted to do in the end. And I think it took a lot of courage, in amongst all of that other stuff, to be able to say, I can't do this.
Spielberg noticed that Roberts' tumultuous relationship with Kiefer was affecting her attitude towards work, and he mentioned it in an interview with 60 Minutes. It was not a great time for Julia and I to be working together, the famed director admitted. Roberts was hurt by Spielberg's words because she had confided in him while on set and had tried her best to be professional. In an interview with Vanity Fair, Roberts lambasted Spielberg for refusing to defend her against allegations that she was difficult to work with. She explained that Spielberg's comments really hurt her feelings and even called him a turncoat. I saw that, and my eyes popped out of my head. I couldn't believe that this person that I knew and trusted was actually hesitating to come to my defense. She also granted an interview where she claimed that Spielberg had a vague and unreliable recollection of what actually transpired on the movie set in the late 1980s.
Steven Spielberg, I find quite confused in his recollection of me.
Given the spicy relationship between these two Hollywood giants, it was only a matter of time before Roberts was asked what she thought about Steven Spielberg's name on the purported Epstein list. We all know journalists are always looking for fodder for their news feeds and won't hesitate to milk a situation, or in this case a relationship, for their advantage. So when Spielberg's name came up, they ran to Roberts for a soundbite, and she seemingly didn't disappoint. Apparently, she hinted that Spielberg harbored dark and disturbing passions that were creepier than what we usually see in his movies.
I'm not even going to talk about Spielberg. Steven Spielberg is...
Recently, documents from the filming of Indiana Jones have resurfaced, and the details are alarming. They show Steven Spielberg in a pre-production meeting with his friends George Lucas and Lawrence Kasdan discussing the creation of the character Indiana Jones, and it appears there's a creepy side to it. The discussion details how an 11-year-old female character met with and fell in love with the titular character Indiana Jones. George Lucas says, "I was thinking that this old guy could have been his mentor. He could have known this little girl when she was just a kid, had an affair with her when she was 11. Then another person replies, and he was 42. Lucas continues, "He hasn't seen her in 12 years. Now she's 22. It's a real strange relationship." Then Spielberg joins the chat and says something very creepy. "She had better be older than 22. Lucas replies, "He's 35, and he knew her 10 years ago when he was 25, and she was only 12. It would be amusing to make her slightly young at the time." The three men went back and forth over the matter, with one suggesting that the girl should rather be the one throwing herself at Jones than the other way around. They even considered bumping up the age to around 15 years, but not further than that, or the story story could lose its edge. They explained that 15 was the best age to peg the girl, and that when she last met Indiana Jones, she came on strongly to him, and the two engaged their carnal desires. A lot of fans were totally grossed out when they found out about how messed up Spielberg and his crew were during the early days of Indiana Jones. Like, seriously, who thought it was cool to make a young girl hook up with an older guy just to make the movie edgier? But hey, it's Hollywood, right? That place where all the shady stuff happens, where big shots use young, eager talents to satisfy their creepy cravings. It's messed up. When fans found out about this hair-raising detail from Indiana Jones, their reaction was something like this.
15-year-old in a relationship with a 27-year-old.
Some fans believe it's just art and separate from these guys' real lives, which might be true, but movies often reflect society, right? So maybe Spielberg and others were into some weird stuff that ended up in their films. If you think Spielberg's thing with young characters and older ones was a one-time thing, think again. There's talk that during Jurassic Park, he was pretty cozy with Ariana Richards. Apparently, he sent her caregiver away so they could be alone together in her hotel room, supposedly to go over lines. The source claims that Spielberg then put her in several tough spots that really messed with her head. Sadly, that first night was just the beginning of some really strange nights, with Spielberg allegedly taking advantage of poor Richards. The source says she's been in therapy for years and refuses to talk about the movie or give interviews. Apparently, she's done with Hollywood and doesn't want anything to do with Spielberg tributes. After Jurassic Park, she did a few more movies but then left Hollywood for good. Now she's a painter, finding solace in expressing herself through art. Maybe that's been her lifeline in therapy.
I get really inspired to paint portraiture, I would say, is my very favorite thing.
Ariana left acting to escape the years of mistreatment allegedly by industry gatekeepers who should have known better. One such figure was Polish director Roman Polanski, who interestingly is a buddy of Spielberg. Not to jump to conclusions, but they say birds of a feather flock together, right? Polanski, like Spielberg, has a troubled history with accusations of inappropriate behavior towards young women. On March 10, 1977, Roman Polanski, then 43 years old, was arrested and charged in Los Angeles with multiple offenses involving Samantha Gailey, now Geimer, who was 13 years old at the time. The charges included unlawful intercourse with a minor, rape by use of perversion, sodomy, lewd and lascivious acts upon a child under 14, and furnishing a controlled substance to a minor. Initially pleading not guilty to all charges, Polanski later accepted a plea deal that led to the dismissal of the more serious charges in exchange for a guilty plea to engaging in unlawful intercourse with a minor.
Yeah, when he wanted to get into jacuzzi, I knew I was in trouble. Like, wait, this is not what he's supposed to be doing.
After undergoing a court-ordered psychiatric evaluation and being placed on probation, Roman Polanski fled from justice in February 1978. He left the United States for England and subsequently France, just hours before his scheduled sentencing. Polanski has since resided mainly in France and has avoided traveling to countries where he might face extradition to the United States. On March 10, 1977, Roman Polanski faced 6 charges related to the 13-year-old Samantha Jane Gailey, now Samantha Geimer. The charges included unlawful intercourse with a female under 18, by use of perversion, sodomy, lewd, and lascivious acts upon a child under 14, and furnishing a controlled substance to a minor. Eventually, Polanski pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of unlawful intercourse with a minor. According to Geimer's testimony to the grand jury, Polanski had asked Geimer's mother, a television actress and model, if he could photograph the girl as part of his work for the French edition of Vogue, which Polanski had been invited to guest edit. Her mother allowed a private photo shoot. Geimer testified that she felt uncomfortable during the first session, in which she posed topless at Polanski's request, and initially did not wish to take part in a second, but nevertheless agreed to another shoot. This took place at the home of actor Jack Nicholson in the Mulholland area of Los Angeles. When the crime was committed, Nicholson was on a ski trip in Colorado, and his live-in girlfriend Angelica Houston, who was there, had left, but later returned while Polanski and Geimer were there. Geimer was quoted in a later article as saying that Houston became suspicious of what was going on behind the closed bedroom door and began banging on it, but left when Polanski insisted they were finishing up the photo shoot. "We did photos with me drinking champagne," Geimer says. "Toward the end, it got a little scary, and I realized he had other intentions, and I knew I was not where I should be. I just didn't quite know how to get myself out of there." In a 2003 interview, she recalled that she began to feel uncomfortable uncomfortable after he asked her to lie down on a bed and described how she attempted to resist. I said, no, I don't want to go in there. No, I don't want to do this. No, and then I didn't know what else to do, she stated, adding, we were alone and I didn't know what else would happen if I made a scene. So I was just scared. And after giving some resistance, I figured, well, I guess I'll get to come home after this. Geimer testified that Polanski provided champagne that they shared as well as part of a quaalude, and despite her protests, he performed OS on her and penetrated her both vaginally and anally, each time after being told no and being asked to stop. Describing the event in his autobiography, Polanski stated that he did not Geimer, that she wasn't unresponsive, and that she did not respond negatively when he inquired as to whether or not she was enjoying what he was doing. The 28-page probation report submitted to the court by Kenneth Fair, his parole officer, and signed by Deputy Irwin Gold, excused his behavior due to his creative genius and being an immigrant from a land with different morals, placed some of the blame on the victim and her mother, and concluded by saying that there was evidence that the victim was not only physically mature, but willing. The officer's report also quoted two psychiatrists' denial of Polanski being a P or S deviant. Claiming to protect Geimer from a trial, her attorney arranged a plea bargain. Polanski accepted, and under the terms of the agreement, the 5 initial charges were dismissed. Instead, Polanski pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of engaging in unlawful S intercourse with a minor. Under the terms of the plea agreement, Roman Polanski was initially ordered to report to a state prison in California for a 90-day psychiatric evaluation, but was allowed to delay this to finish a film project in Europe. While in Europe, filming the 1979 remake of Hurricane, Polanski was photographed at Oktoberfest in 1977, surrounded by young girls and beer jars.
That's the moment. Then I realized something was wrong. I was frightened. I didn't know what to do, and I just knew then. I was like, oh, this guy, like, he wants to get his hands on me. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Polanski eventually returned to California and began his evaluation at Chino State Prison on December 19, 1977. He was released after 42 days instead of the full 90. His lawyers anticipated probation at his sentencing hearing, especially since the probation officer, examining psychiatrist, and the victim all recommended against prison time. However, on January 20th, 1978, Polanski was fired from his position as director of Hurricane. Regarding the proposed sentencing, Judge Lawrence J. Rittenband allegedly suggested to Roman Polanski's attorneys that he intended to send the director to prison and order his deportation. According to the 2008 documentary Roman Polanski, Wanted and Desired, Deputy District Attorney David Wells showed Judge Rittenband photographs of Polanski at a party in Munich with young girls, implying Polanski was not taking the charges involving the 13-year-old seriously. This interaction would be considered ex parte communication, as Wells was not officially part of the case, but was associated with the state of California. Faced with the threat of imprisonment and deportation, Polanski chose to flee the United States and went to England, becoming a fugitive from justice. Regarding the proposed sentencing, Rittenband said, on January 30th, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Gunson came to my chambers to discuss Polanski's psychiatric report. I told them that I had carefully read it and that I felt it was superficial, replete with many inaccuracies and factually unsupported conclusions, and was conspicuous more for what it failed to report than what it did report. I believe I used the word whitewash. I stated that there was absolutely no mention in the report of any discussions which the counselors and psychiatrists at Chino had with Mr. Polanski relating to the serious and aggravated charges of and alcohol, sodomy, and oral copulation of the 13-year-old victim. I believe I pointed out to them that a statement in the report that throughout the experience with the victim, Mr. Polanski seems to have been unaware that he was involving himself in a criminal offense, an isolated instance of naivete, unusual in a mature, sophisticated man, was one of the most fatuous statements in a diagnostic report that I have ever read. I told Mr. Dalton that I did not propose to follow the recommendations, which were for straight probation, without any additional time in custody. And the saddest part was that all the Hollywood executives rallied to Roman Polanski's defense at the time. Back then, most people didn't question why his colleagues were so quick to support him. But looking at what we know now about the dark side of Hollywood, many fans understand why those execs were falling over themselves to defend their colleague. Later, fans learned that the judge had initially planned to give Roman Polanski a 50-year sentence for his crimes. However, the judge reportedly changed his mind after a meeting with Polanski Polanski's lawyer in chambers. The lawyer later told journalists that they were preparing to sentence Polanski to 50 years instead of agreeing to time served, which they had previously negotiated through a plea bargain that the judge had approved. Feeling the judge couldn't be trusted to uphold the plea bargain and might sentence him harshly, Polanski decided to flee. He informed a friend of his plan to leave the country, and a day before his sentencing, he fled to London and then on to France, where he has lived ever since.
Roman Polanski got caught and he fled the country to avoid persecution. That's what happened. And he's been a fugitive ever since.
Many fans aren't surprised by the later accusations against Spielberg, considering his association with Polanski and the controversial pre-production meeting that led to a 15-year-old female character sleeping with an older male character in the film. It's not too far-fetched to connect these dots, given how movies often reflect real life and directors sometimes project their fantasies onto their work. Fans believe that such behavior might have been more common among directors and executives during that time. Stories like Thandie Newton's, where she shared her experiences of being objectified on a casting couch, reinforce this perception.
I found when I was a 16-year-old, fresh from boarding school, going out into, on the casting couch, I was definitely objectified to an extreme.
Thandie also disclosed that she was manipulated deliberately when she was young and joined the industry. The incident happened when her father went to another country and she was alone. She said, "I was 16 and a virgin. I'd been psychologically G over weeks. I didn't fight him off. I was almost paralyzed with fear. It was SA." During an interview, she recalled another incident which took place when she was auditioning at the studio for the second time. In the meantime, she was asked to be a part of an indecent activity.
And the director asked me to sit with my legs apart. The camera was right between, positioned where it could see up my skirt.
Thandie further disclosed that she was also asked to sit in a weird manner in which she was not comfortable, saying, "He asked me to put my leg over the arm of the chair and think about the character I was supposed to be having the dialogue with and how it felt to be made love to by this person. He was a director. I was still very young and thought it must be normal." Years later, when Thandie Newton encountered the same director at the Cannes Festival, she noticed him giving her a strange smile. This raised her suspicion, prompting her to investigate further. To her shock, she discovered that the director had been secretly recording audition tapes and showing them to others in his home. This revelation explained his peculiar behavior towards Thandie and shed light on an unsettling practice within the industry.
Or used to show that video late at night to interested parties at his house.
Thandie Newton, known for her roles in Line of Duty and Westworld, has been an outspoken advocate for shedding light on the pervasive issues of violence and racism in the entertainment industry. Throughout her career, she has courageously spoken out about her own experiences and the pressure she faced to remain silent about them.
It's not about the person that's been It's not just their role to say enough. It's about the people around. How much are the people that witness, how much are they perpetrators of the crime?
During another interview with British Vogue, she has explained how these extremely violent incidents have changed her psychologically and physically as well. She said, "There's a moment where the ghost of me changed, and it was 16. He derailed me from myself utterly. I was traumatized. It was a kind of PTSD for sure. I was so distraught and appalled that a director had a young actress, and that it was happening elsewhere. Minors getting A and how F up it was. I was basically waiting for someone to come along and say, well, what shall we do about this?" Newton revealed that in the aftermath of her A, she struggled with eating disorders, resorting to controlling her food intake as a way to cope with the trauma. She said, "I punished my body to try and find my heart." It's important to clarify that while Spielberg wasn't directly accused of mistreating Ariana Richards, actor Crispin Glover, known for playing George McFly in Back to the Future, did make allegations against Spielberg in 2003. Glover's book and subsequent film, titled What Is It?, included claims suggesting Spielberg's interest in depicting young boys in compromising situations might reflect personal inclinations. Fans have speculated about directors projecting their fantasies in disguised ways through their movies, such as the 1985 film, possibly alluding to Spielberg's involvement. These discussions often highlight how themes in cinema can blur lines between fiction and personal life.
Oh my God!
Here, a boy seems to be reattaching the broken pecker of a statue to its original place with an expression that has suggestive undertones. Many fans questioned why, of all the places, it was the pecker of the statue that got broken. They wondered why these children would be subjected to these kinds of depictions when there were several ways to elicit laughter from the audience. So you see why Glover would have a problem with Spielberg's alleged obsession with portraying boys in funny ways. Check out his clip where one of the boys had the pecker in his mouth of all places after it had broken off the statue. It often takes a long time for victims to gather the courage to speak out against such acts. And by then, the perpetrators may be older and less powerful, having already caused significant harm. This is why figures like Ariana Grande and Jennifer Lawrence advocate for immediate steps to protect people working in Hollywood. Lawrence argues that if we can create safe environments for animals during filming, we should prioritize doing the same for humans in such potentially toxic environments. She believes it's crucial to prevent these cases from happening in the first place, rather than waiting and hoping they don't occur again in the future.
I mean, there's protections for animals, on filming. I think there need to be protections legally put in place to protect people when they're filming, human beings.
It's unfortunately common for victims to already feel burdened by guilt, and public stigmatization only exacerbates their suffering. This tends to occur more frequently when the perpetrator is a wealthy or prominent public figure. In some cases, perpetrators manipulate the narrative to portray victims as criminals seeking financial gain, which further skews public perception. Sadly, the public often believes these narratives and may rally to the defense of the A, dismissing or discrediting the victim's account. One person wrote, "Just because a person is successful and wealthy does not mean they are a good person." Another one added, "All of these Hollywood psychos need to be held accountable, especially when children are involved." However, Spielberg hasn't been sued yet for his alleged crimes. People in Hollywood whisper about it behind closed doors, but no one's had the guts to take him to court. He's on Epstein's list, and with what's out there, it feels like someone's bound to step up soon. Kids especially need protection from elites who use their innocence to cause lasting harm. That's it for today. See you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.